Hello and welcome to the Mark Philpott Inside Sport YouTube channel, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing the 2022 Rugby Championship season. Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're a regular follower of the channel, thank you for coming back. If you're a first timer here, welcome aboard. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave your comments and give us a thumbs up for this video if you like it. Now, there's been a little bit time gone by since the end of the Rugby Championships, and I wanted to wait until the dust settled a little bit and we could have a fair assessment of what's gone on in this year's Rugby Championship competition. There's no doubt that it was a fantastic competition. It went down to the last weekend, round 6 of the competition, before we knew who actually won the championship. What I thought I would do in this video is go through each team's performance over the course of the championship, have a look at how they performed, and give my opinion on what I think that team did well and could improve. Also, we're going to have a look at the official ratings in terms of the refereeing and TMO decisions throughout the championship. I'm sure a lot of people have got a few things to say about that. So let's get started, and first of all we're going to look at Argentina. They finished last in the championship this year, but they provided some good performances, and in fact they broke history for the first time by beating the New Zealand All Blacks in New Zealand. They lost 4 games and won 2 games. They beat Australia 48 points to 17 in Argentina, and they beat New Zealand 25 points to 18 in New Zealand. They had 1 bonus point throughout the competition for their game against Australia, and I think it would be fair to say that the Argentinians played extremely well at the beginning of the competition and then fell away towards the end. I think Michael Cheika and his team of coaches are doing a wonderful job with the Argentinian team, and I don't think they should be underestimated at all heading into next year's Rugby World Cup. They're going to be going off to the Northern Hemisphere to be playing England at Twickenham in early November, and it's going to be interesting to see how they transform their game going into the Northern Hemisphere. So a good performance by Argentina. I think they'll be happy by the fact that they beat the All Blacks in New Zealand for the first time. That'll give them something to take away from this season and from this championship. But I think overall they might be a little bit disappointed that they didn't put up a more of a valiant effort in some of their games where they looked like they had the potential for coming back and winning some of those games, but they didn't kick on in the second half. They were also, like most of the teams, pinned down by a lot of yellow cards and infringements during the Rugby Championship this year, and I think discipline is going to have to be something that comes more into their games, as it is with some of the other teams as well. But overall, not a bad performance by Argentina. They ended up with 9 points in the championship this year. And I think, again, their game against New Zealand was a great example of how they can turn things around. Let's see what you think about Argentina. Are they going to be a force to be reckoned with at the Rugby World Cup next year? Or do you think they're going to be one of those teams that struggle through the quarterfinal stage and we end up losing them perhaps at that stage? Give me your thoughts on Argentina. Okay, time to look at that team that got 3rd in this year's championship, and that was Australia. They ended up also only winning 2 games. They beat Argentina 41-26 in Argentina, and they beat South Africa 25-17 in Australia. I guess with the record that Australia had against South Africa in Australia, they were pretty much sure to win one of the games in Australia. They'll be disappointed that they didn't win both games in Australia. And it was a different South African team that turned up to Sydney after being beaten the week before in Adelaide. I think Dave Rennie's done some good things to this Australian team. They've brought in some younger players that are kicking on. They just haven't got a lot of experience, and they haven't been stepping up when the pressure goes on. So I think Dave Rennie's going to find himself in a bit of a trouble spot getting these players having that experience before they head into the World Cup next year. But as we've always learnt, never write Australia off when it comes to World Cup rugby. And I'm sure when they head to France next year, they're going to be a team that can cause upsets and perhaps go all the way in the Rugby World Cup next year. They finished on 10 points in this competition, ended up with 2 bonus points, And yeah, overall, I think they'll be a little bit disappointed in their overall performance. First of all, by losing to the Argentinian Pumas and also losing to South Africa in Sydney. I think that's a match that they could have won, and they thought they were going to win after their performance in Adelaide, but they really let South Africa bring their physicality, and South Africa stepped up in that second game in Australia. The last game against the All Blacks at Eden Park was a bit of a whitewash for Australia. I think the Eden Park voodoo got into their heads a little bit, even though Dave Rennie and the team played it up quite a lot before that game, that they weren't going to let that Eden Park voodoo get to them. I think it did in the end, and I think the All Blacks played a much better, improved game in that last game in round 6. So overall, I think a disappointing rugby championship for Australia this year. They'll go away having lost the Bledisloe Cup again, and they'll have a lot of work to do before they get ready for the World Cup next year. Let me know what you think of Australia's performance in the Rugby Championship this year. Do you think they underperformed, overperformed, or pretty much performed how they are at this stage of their evolution? Be keen to hear from you on that one. Okay, up to second place in the championship this year, and that was South Africa, coming in with 18 points, 2 bonus points for South Africa. And they lost just 2 matches in the Rugby Championship out of 6. Their first loss was to New Zealand in South Africa, 35-23 at Ellis Park. A great game by the All Blacks on the bounce back of being beaten by the Argentinian Pumas. So the All Blacks really stood up and took that one to South Africa. And then the second loss by the South Africans was to Australia in Adelaide, 25 points to 17. A disappointing start to the Australian campaign. I thought the Springboks were going to head to Australia and win both of those matches. It wasn't the case, and I think because there was some unrest in the South African camp leading up to those matches, who knows if that had an effect on the team spirit. It may have done so. Also, quite a lot of changes happening within the South African team, and a lot of the South African audience in my YouTube channel have been talking about how they're a bit upset with the amount of changes that are going on in the South African team. Kicking was also a problem for the South Africans throughout the series. They haven't found a goal kicker that is consistently in the zone, so to speak. And I think in a number of the games it really caused the South Africans a lot of trouble. So that's one area they're going to have to look to when they head to the World Cup next year. Francois Steyn, is he going to go? Is he going to stay behind? Who knows? There's lots of cause for different number 10s to be put into that position. Of course, Damien Willemse got injured towards the end of the championship. He looks to be a great player in that number 10 jersey. But again, the goal kicking solution needs to be found for South Africa. I think overall a good series for South Africa. They could have won it in the last game if they'd scored a number of more points against the Argentinians. However, they probably shouldn't have let themselves get to the situation where they had to win that last game. They had chances to beat New Zealand. They had chances also to beat Australia in that first game in Australia. And if they'd taken that, it would have been a lot closer Rugby Championship final, that's for sure. But overall, I was impressed with the South Africans. I think they've got a huge amount of talent in this team. It's about putting it together on the park on the day. Their backs are very dangerous. They've got try-scoring weapons everywhere. I think Jesse Kriel needs to get more ball out wide, as with the wingers, and Willie LaRue coming in as well at fullback. I think their forwards are pretty much picking themselves at the moment. Mostert should be starting, I think, in the lineup, and I think a lot of the South African viewers will agree with that. But I see some good things happening in that South African pack, and they did give it to each of the teams at different times throughout this competition. Maybe against the All Blacks, their line-out wasn't so secure, but that's something that can definitely be worked on, and they'll come back stronger for sure. They scored 2 bonus points in the championship, and they ended up on 18 points, as I said, 1 point behind the eventual winners of the championship, which was the New Zealand All Blacks. And I think South Africa, despite the disappointment of not getting enough points in that last game against Argentina, will be satisfied that they had a relatively good rugby championship. Well, the All Blacks won the championship this year, but it wasn't without some sweat, some nerves, and some question marks. And those question marks still remain, I think. The All Blacks had losses to South Africa, 26 points to 10, and also to Argentina for the first time in New Zealand, 25 points to 18. The Argentinians beat the All Blacks in New Zealand, historic win. And after those games, there was a lot of pressure on Ian Foster and his crew to get things right for the All Blacks. And eventually we saw a good performance by the All Blacks at Eden Park to beat Australia in that final round and to win the Rugby Championship. But I certainly haven't gone away with a lot of confidence in this All Black team. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens when they get to the Northern Hemisphere at the end of the year and play the Northern Hemisphere teams. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people are imagining, and maybe people are imagining that the All Blacks are going to suffer a couple of losses when they get to the Northern Hemisphere. Still a lot of pressure on Ian Foster, Joe Schmidt and their training group, or their coaching group I should say. Their selections also, it's good to see Brodie Retallick back. He's a fantastic player, and also refreshed. Ardie Savea is playing out of his boots at the moment, but I'm still not settled with the All Blacks backline. I think they need to do some work around that. Geordie Barrett at number 12 for the All Blacks seems to be a good thing, and I think Richie Mo'unga starting in the 10 jersey is also a good thing. So the All Blacks have a little bit to work out. I don't see a lot of strong momentum coming through from this team yet. They've got a little bit of confidence back now. Are they going to be able to transfer that to their Northern Hemisphere games and beat those tough teams up in the Northern Hemisphere? Time will tell, and we can't wait for that tour to get underway. So overall, Rugby Championship, a very close championship. There were good games and there were bad games by different teams. There wasn't a lot of consistency, and a lot of this came down to the refereeing and the officials to do with this Rugby Championship. And I just want to take a minute now to have a look at this and give a bit of a rating of my opinion on the whole official problems that we have in world rugby at the moment. And of course this comes from the head of the world sport of rugby. These rules are being based on the interpretation from referees. They're only trying to do their job. Referees are having different interpretation of the rules because it is hard for them. And I think we're seeing too many stops in play. Some of these games, instead of 80 minutes of rugby, we're actually getting over 100 minutes of game time. And this seems a little bit ludicrous because it's stopping the flow of games. It's also causing problems with the outcomes of games. You know, the interpretation between what happened in the game in Australia between New Zealand and Australia in the last minute definitely impacted the outcome of that particular match. Whether it was right or not, a decision was made and it determined the outcome of that particular match. But getting back to the point, I think the official process has to be looked at. The TMO involvement is ridiculous. We're getting all these decisions referred to the TMO because the referees know that if they get it wrong, they're going to be caught out black and white terms with seeing it on a big screen. And I think this puts a lot of pressure on the referees, whether we think that's right or wrong, or whether we think some referees are doing better than others. That's always going to be the case when you've got human intervention involved. So overall, I think the Rugby Championship was ruined quite a lot by the refereeing and the TMO involvement in this particular championship. We saw some of the games so stop-start and affected outcomes because of the decisions made on and off the field. And I think from a viewing spectacle, we've got to change this heading into the World Cup, because this is going to perhaps ruin not only the outcome of the World Cup, but some teams' opportunities to progress in the World Cup. So overall, I give the rating for the officials of the Rugby Championship this year only a 5 out of 10. And I think that my case in point is all the different stoppages that we had that were unnecessary or wrong in these particular matches. Let me know what you think about the officials, whether it be the referees or the TMO interventions throughout these games. Give me the ones that you think were the most horrendous, and whether or not you agree with me on my rating. So there we are. The Rugby Championship for 2022 is now done and dusted. The All Blacks have won with 19 points. South Africa second on 18, Australia with 10, and Argentina with 9. We now wait for the southern teams to go to the Northern Hemisphere, and we wait for the Six Nations competition as well. I will be following those games here on this channel, so if you want to hear my previews and reviews of the Six Nations matches, you'll be able to hear all those videos here on my channel. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you've liked this video, give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave your comments about the 2022 Rugby Championship season, how you found it, what team you supported, and how you think they will progress in next year's World Cup. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much again for watching my videos. I'll be back again soon with another video. Bye for now.